This past week, I made one of the best decisions of my life regarding my game art. And there are some things that I think you should consider if you're a new developer that will help you make this same decision. Welcome back to KindQuest Games, where I am logging my journey on creating my very first game called The Last Bastion. And I'm having a blast doing it. It's been a fantastic time. 2 weeks ago, I was wrestling with the question, should I be making my own pixel art for my video game? And I didn't know if I was going to be any good at it. I didn't know if it was going to take up too much time, take me away from things that I should be focusing on. And I'm happy to say that I made the decision to do my own pixel art for my game. And it was the best decision I could have made. And I think that if you've never made a game before and you're asking yourself the same question, I think you should strongly consider trying to do the art yourself for your first game. If anything, just to see if you enjoy it and see if you are any good at it. I was not that good at the beginning, and I would say I'm still very maybe crude in my art right now, but I am just loving it, and it's injecting so much life into my game development journey. For the first time over the past 2 weeks, instead of me thinking at the end of my workday, man, I just want to go play a game, right? I just want to go consume a video game downstairs. I've instead thought, man, I just can't wait to get to my iPad and my Apple Pencil so that I can make more art and put it into my video game. So it's been such a cool journey to get that far and to be at that point. I want to show you a little bit about my art journey and where I came from and where I got to. So if you remember my first video, this was my first piece of art, 64 by 64 pixels. Decent piece of art. I put it into my game. I really liked how it looked. This was my second 64 by 64 that I got about halfway through before I decided to shift gears. I had some comments on my last video saying, you might want to consider toning your art down a little bit on the detail and just getting assets out there quickly. And after considering that comment, I thought to myself, you know what, you're probably right. So what I did is I went on to YouTube and I looked up some training videos on doing pixel art, found a guy by the name of Adam Eunice. You're probably familiar with him if you've done this at all. You've probably seen his name or his videos pop up. And he recommended doing silhouettes. So I did some of that. And these are some of the silhouettes. Here, let me move this out of the way a little bit. This is the Nanner Pancakes palette, by the way. That's what this palette is here. I'm trying to stay within that palette to boost my creativity a little bit. These are the silhouettes I came up with. Now, I did not come up with all of these. My boys, who are 8 years old, they saw me doing some of these silhouettes, and they're like, Daddy, I want to try. So I let them jump in, and one of my boys did this guy right here. And another one of my boys did this one right here. So after doing some of these rough silhouettes of what I thought could look like cool enemies in my game, I started to pick my favorites and kind of iterate them with some shading and some color and whatnot, and came up with this guy. This is the Bastion Rusher, and these are 3 different versions of him. And I selected this one to put in the game. So he's in the game right now. And the second silhouette I really liked was one of my boys' silhouettes over here. And I created some versions of what I thought that character could look like. Some of this like half man, half machine kind of sci-fi character. And I went with, I think I put number 2 in the game as well on this one too. I really liked it. So this guy is like a corruptor. His job is to take ground away from the player so the player cannot deploy walls or turrets or whatever in that space that has been corrupted by this guy. He has a secondary role where he also heals his friends. The next silhouette that I really enjoyed was this one. And I started to iterate that one. Came up with these 3 different like drone looking things. And this guy's job is to basically go for the player first. His primary target is the player, wants to take him out quickly. So the final silhouette was my other boy's silhouette. Now, I actually was looking at this at the very beginning thinking it was one of my favorites. This one kind of looks like an eye, but it also looked very complicated. And I was like, man, how am I going to like tone this down a little bit? So I took it and I started to iterate it, and this is the first one I came up with, kind of a corrupted looking eyeball sort of thing. And then I took all that corruption away and added some, rotating orbs around it, and then kind of started to make it look like a flower, and kind of got halfway through that. And I was like, you know, I'm not too keen on that. So I went with this guy to put in my game, number 2. And he is actually my first animation. Now I want to show you a little bit of where we are at with the Last Bastion here. Get this started. So here we go. Another piece of art that I was working on is the Bastion itself, since this is such a key component of the game. The Bastion is something that can be upgraded and does have attacks and whatnot. You can see that it's shooting some of these enemies that are coming at it. It has a random starting pulse of light that comes out and basically vaporizes things. So essentially what the player does is he runs around, he tries to protect the Bastion, and his goal is to keep everything out, because if the Bastion falls, game over. I've got a bunch of upgrades that I've built into the game that still need some art on the cards, and they need to be refined a little bit. But what the player does is he runs around, he gathers these little experience orbs and can choose different upgrades for himself or the Bastion. And for now, what we have is we have Bastion rushers coming in. You can see the animation, kind of these rotating orbs going around the enemy. So cool. Such a fun thing to do. My first animation. It was a great time. And these waves are happening behind the scene, where we have an increase to the spawn rate of the enemy and frequency of the enemy. And eventually what's going to happen is, I don't know if I'll get that far in this run because I've kind of been spending some time talking and whatnot, but eventually what happens is the enemies get kind of fed up with everything, and the enemies decide that, you know what, I'm going to end up launching other stuff at this player. And so the enemies launch a boss at the player at some point. And what'll happen is, if this boss is defeated, not only does the boss introduce new enemies into the mix, the player aggressor enemy, but the enemies will, or the boss enemy will also drop the player's projectile weapon that he will retrofit onto himself, kind of like some scavenged technology. And that projectile weapon will stay with the player for the duration of the game and will have its own set of upgrades and level up cards that the player can acquire to strengthen the projectile weapon. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I do want to talk a little bit about the boss art before we show that. So if you look at the boss here, I've got what's called just boss 1 for now. So the boss is going to initially come out, and he's going to have attached to him these player aggressor enemies that we already talked about. And he's going to launch those enemies into the play space, which is going to introduce that enemy to the player and introduce it to the wave system for the next wave iteration. Get that. After it launches those off of its body, it will then proceed to rotate these guns on its backside and shoot projectiles at the player. They will not be homing projectiles. They'll just kind of shoot toward the player where the player was, maybe a little bit ahead of where it thinks the player is going to go. It also has this major cannon right up here, and this cannon will shoot out a larger orb that will kind of track the player. Now, to give you a little bit of what I'm working on for the player, I've got some really rough sketches here. I don't really quite know what I'm going to do with the player yet, but these are some of my rough sketches, some just ideas I'm throwing out there. Really liking the look of this guy, but it needs obviously a lot more detail. Really like this guy too. He's looking pretty good. His arm's a little janky right now. Looks a little funky, but I really am loving game development. I'm not going to lie. I mean, this is one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life, and I'm kicking myself for not doing it sooner. I'll be honest with you. So I want to thank you for staying with me in this channel, staying with me in this video. I love your support. I love your comments. I love the advice that a lot of you give for helping me out here. And it is really shaping the game a lot. I mean, this game was, in my mind, something a lot different than what it is now. And a lot of that influence is from you, other developers, and you players of video games. So thank you so much for interacting with me and really making this such a personal experience for me. I'll see you in the next one.